lump sums are determined within their vote. So if, for instance, a whole raft of additional costs in terms of pension cover was to come before a specific sector, as you refer to, it will be reflected in that particular subhead. So I can only take responsibility for this. And in terms of this, which is the civil servants, yes, we have got it wrong. It's 5%, but I think there are mitigating circumstances this year that I think anyone fair-minded person would say, because the number of exits, that level of difference is there. And because of the fact that under this unique arrangement, people can leave. People could leave after the budget. If people don't like what they see in next week's budget, they could head off if they're 60 years of age. And we still have to pay people because they're entitled to it. So, yes, we're out by 5%, but in those circumstances, I don't think it's as... I'll leave that up to your own judgment.
Okay, I just come on that, Minister, and I won't push it because I suspect Minister Howden is dealing with this more so. But I'm going to say, and we'll move on, I reject everything you've just said about the 5% for this basis, because I'm looking at the briefing note your department gave us. There's the subhead A4, which this is all about, the people who left this year. The subhead A4.
Yeah, which is the lump sums.
Yeah, and I said in that heading, the shortfall is the 23 million, and that's why we need the 25 million. All other subheads, including those, the original estimate was 384 million, and the anticipated spend at the end of the year is 383 million, within 1/3 of 1%. So all your calculations in relation to those in the system already were spot on, within 99.7%. The entire request for the supplementary estimate deals with one subhead only, and all I'm saying, in that subhead directly, A4, you're out by 20%.
No, if you look at the 522, which is the new figure we're looking for, that's made up of three things, Deputy. The 485 million, which we spent to date, right? The 32 million, which is the 2 months remaining, November and December, and the additional 5 million on the lump sum. So we've gone from 500 million odd to 522 million, but the 522 million is made of three elements: the lump sum 5, the next, November, December payments, 32, and the amount spent so far, 485. Now the dilemma is, of course, the reason why the A4 is harder to predict, I'm assuming, is because it's the lump sum, the exit point that the person leaves. So, what is it? Salary and a half, isn't it? For the lump sum. Yeah. That's pretty much depending on who's exiting.
Okay.
We'll move on. It's more costly.
Minister, I accept that the overall vote of the $500,000 is within about 5% of the original target, but the subheading that's causing all the problem, that subhead is 20% out, right? And is masked in the overall bigger figures, and we'll move on. The final question I want to ask you, Minister, the final question is, in relation to the fact that we are here having a discussion now about pensions for retired civil servants, and you're coming here to the Dáil for an extra 25 million for this heading, as you've said yourself. Can you give us the figures in relation to those retired pensions? How many of those people are on pensions of over 50,000? How many are over 60? How many are over 70, 80, 90, and up to 100? Because it's very important. I would put it this way: if there's anybody in there on a pension of over €100,000, and you're coming to the Oireachtas for a supplementary estimate to pay a pension over 100,000, I have a problem. So I'm asking the question, and this will be my final point. I'll just come in on this response.
I can give the Deputy that 100% answer on that. That's thanks to Deputy MacDonald, who put a very useful number of questions to us recently. So the information I have here is thanks to Deputy MacDonald via the department. And I just want to say, before I read out the figures in the total number of pensioners, what they receive, Minister Howden made a very crucial point recently, I think, that 1% of public service pensioners are in receipt of pensions of in excess of 60,000, and only a few hundred have a pension in excess of 100,000. I think on the debate that we had in private members' time some weeks ago, I can recall, because I asked the question at the time, how many retired civil servants, politicians and judges have a pension of over 100,000? And I think I'm right saying 112 people. I think was the figure I asked for at the 84. And you asked the question, because, correctly asked, I'll give you the figures exactly. So on pensions of 10,000, this is in July, sorry, there's a more up-to-date one, is it? 84 civil servants had pensions of over 100,000. That's as of September this year, Deputy. 84. There are further 28 ministers and judges, which aren't in this vote, of course, but they're the House's votes. So to answer your question honestly and directly, 84 is the number.
And say over 70, 80,000. Have you the figures?
Well, these figures, which thanks to Deputy MacDonald were got in July, between 70 and 80, it's 171. Maybe we'll just take it between 50 and upwards. Between 50 and 60, 769. Between 60 and 70, 57. Between 70 and 80, 171. Between 80 and 90, 23. And over 90, 85. So if you add up those, Deputy, 769, 57, 171, 23 and 85, what do we get? Probably close to about 900, do we? If we get that. Do we get about 900? 800?
The 85 include the 84 over 100,000?
Yes.
1,900,000.
Yeah, the figures in July were 85, the figures in September 84. Someone must have died.
And that's over 100,000. So I conclude...
No, I apologise. The figures in... the most up-to-date ones, over 100,000, is 84.
Okay, Minister, you don't mind me saying?
No doubt at all.
You have a brass neck to come into the Oireachtas to seek a supplementary estimate to pay pensions for people, retired civil servants, 84 of whom are on over 100,000. You have a brass neck. And I actually... I
think there's a point of clarification.
Benchmark 1 and 2.
This is for the people who are retiring now. It's not the existing pensioners. This is for people who are exiting now. Well, if one looks
the
at
overall estimate you keep telling me is 500 million.
Yes.
Yeah. And in that figure, you're telling me that your payments, your spend to the 22nd of the 11th was 485 million out of your original estimate of 500, and you need the extra money to pay for the next 2 pension instalments, plus the... Yeah, so included in the 25 million you are seeking here today is payments for retired civil servants, 84 of whom are on pensions, not salaries, not working anymore, pensions of over 100,000 euro. Now, have you learned nothing yet?
Well,
have you learned anything? To come into the Dáil asking for a supplementary estimate to pay 84 people,
mess to be tidied up.
to pay over 80...
Brass neck, that's unbelievable.
Deputy,
Explain to the member of the committee
they'll get their...
how they got those pensions of over 100,000.
You'll have your opportunity. You'll have your opportunity.
He's right. The Deputy is absolutely right. 84 pensions currently in the system out of 15,502 have pensions of over 100,000. 84 persons out of 15,500 have pensions of over 100,000. That is a fact, Chairman.
I'm just saying, Minister, I hope we'll be here next Wednesday evening reversing these enormous pensions of over 100,000.
Minister, how long was he tell you one simple fact, Deputy? And it is this, something brought about by this government, that anyone on a pension of over 100,000, we have introduced a new 20% reduction on their pension over 100,000, brought about by this government, in the context of the financial emergency legislation that was introduced in 2009. Where there are reports made to the Dáil, where there are stringent conditions attached to that legislation, where we've done it in a proportionate way, brought about by your government in 2009, which has been extended. So, any fair-minded person, I think, would come to the view that in terms of the additional decisions we've taken as a government in this specific area for people of 100,000 and over, in this 20% additional charge we're putting on them, I think has been fair.
My final point, and it's 10 seconds. I think, Minister, I'm proposing to you, aside from this supplementary estimate today, that under the financial emergency measures in the public interest 2009 legislation, you make an amendment to that before we go home at Christmas to ensure that no civil servant will receive, retired civil servant, that nobody will receive a pension of over 100,000.
I note your request.
Thank you very much. Deputy MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. And just to assist you, Minister, and it might be of some interest to Deputy Fleming, I've actually published that very legislation. So,
You're ahead of us, Debbie.
hey, there you go. The request for this supplementary estimate, I accept your point entirely in respect of the timing of it. I think that's fair enough. However, it has to be said that the irony of you coming into this committee looking for clearance for this additional 25 million, literally days in advance of your next austerity budget, I don't think is lost on anyone. And I don't think you can separate out this request for additional monies from the broader issue of public service pensions in their totality. I think it is important to say that the vast majority of public sector workers have pensions of €30,000 or less. That's the reality for the vast bulk of people. But there is an issue, Minister, around those who are in receipt of excessive pension payments. You've read out the figures that I got from a PQ last summer yourself. It is fair to say that there are only a limited number of people who are in receipt of pensions in excess of €100,000. So it's €100,000 plus. You might tell the committee who is the leader, what's the top of the range pension being paid out at the moment from that 84. We had suggested, Minister, a system using that FEMPI legislation and the levies on pensions over and above €60,000. We set them out in a legislative form, and our proposal remains on the table. And if you were to use that mechanism, you could in fact make a saving of €10 million. So rather than coming into this committee looking for 25, you would be coming in looking for 15. So I want to ask you, is it your intention, is it the Minister's intention to revisit the FEMPI legislation and the levies being paid on very, very high pensions?
Sir.
Well, firstly, can I thank the Deputy for her private member's bill, which the government will give due consideration to when the matter comes before the House. And I want to be honest as well. You know, we will look at any and every proposal, Chairman, that is made. As she rightly says, the great majority of public service pensioners are on very modest pensions. And she asked the question, those on 10,000 or less, it's as I understand, Deputy, about 7,000 pensioners have a very, very modest pension. And I think we're all conscious of large pensions and exits upon which people leave the public sector. That's why the government has taken this decision, as I said to Deputy Fleming, to increase the amount of rebate effectively for people over 100,000, added to the amount of additional taxation and, of course, the levies that have been imposed and the reductions on pay at the very top within the Irish public sector. What I would say to Deputy MacDonald, I think I've made this point to her before, and you know, this is something that internationally people do have regard for. Sorry, they have regard for. That over a 3-year period, if we look at the totality of public sector pay and pensions, if you add it all up, because I think there's no point in separating. I think you can't separate pay and pensions. I think it's the same amount of money that is coming from our revenue stream. 3 years ago, the totality of public sector pay and pensions was about 20 billion. Now, if you add up public sector pay and pension, and of course pensions have gone up, but pay has come down because of all of the measures that have been introduced, it's 17.5 billion. So over a 3-year period, colleagues, 2.5 billion has been taken out of the total public sector pay and pension bill, in a circumstance where not one day of industrial action has been lost.
And can I just say, Minister, there's some validity to saying that you have to take pay and pensions as a whole. I appreciate that. But we're speaking here for the purposes of this revised estimate on the issue of pensions. So if we could stick to that, I think it would be helpful.
I was just clarifying the point that where some people make the charge that an enormous enormous change has not occurred in the totality of expenditure here. The point I'm making to the committee is that over a 3-year period, 2.5 billion has been taken out of the totality of public sector pay and pensions, and there's another billion to go, I hasten to add. But it's an example of the road that has been travelled. And I would also make the point, because I know her point really relates to the people over 100,000. The greatest reduction in public, in terms of people's pay level, has been at the top of the public sector, up to 35% in cases. So if the argument is being put forward by the Deputy that those at the top haven't made a contribution, it is not borne out by the statistics which show that those at the very top of the tree have given a huge amount of their salary, rightly so, because they can afford it. The government has not been exclusive in this regard. What we have said through Minister Howell and Minister Noonan is we will look at any and every measure which could help to make further savings in this area, and we're not ruling options out.
But can I just say, and we don't have the scope here for a full debate on...
Your time, Deputy.
Thank you, Chairman. You know what, a 14% reduction in your pay if you are a clerical officer within the civil service is such an incredible chunk taken away from very, very modest earnings. And I think I just think it's misleading to posit that situation as against somebody who was on over €200,000 taking a bigger knock. They had proportionately so much more that the consequences for that worker and for their family are in no way comparable with workers further down the scale. And I think that's a reality borne out and known by public sector workers. But if we can just park the pay issue, Minister, for a moment and go back again to the pensions. I mean, are you comfortable with the fact that there are 84 people with pensions in excess of €100,000? That's just a straight question.
Well, she referred to misleading, and I think equally it's misleading for the Deputy or anyone else to posit the view that simply going after people of over 100,000 and more in terms of pensions will make a huge difference in terms of the totality of the saving. But I just make that observation. She referred to a point of misleading. What I am very happy about is the fact that this government has introduced a range of measures to make sure that those who have more in terms of their pension are paying more and have seen real substantial reductions in their pensions. And I think that is something that the government has been clearly setting out its view from the first time it came into government. I'm equally happy with the evidence we have on a legal basis, because pensions is a form of deferred remuneration, as the Deputy is aware, in terms of its property right component in terms of the Constitution. That if she's asking me the straight question, have we pushed the potential of doing this in terms of the existing financial emergency legislation that was passed in 2009, it is the strong view of the department that if you go after a cohort of people within the pension cover, that we could be leaving ourselves open for a legal challenge, and that the worst circumstance would exist if we were to lose in that scenario, because then the entire legislative framework would fall down. I think Minister Howell has made this point to you repeatedly, Deputy, that there has got to be a proportionate view as to the reductions that have been made. That is why, as you well know, that the reductions in terms of pension cover, in terms of all of the cohort of salaries that are there, have been proportionate, and we stand over that. And my comfort or otherwise is the fact that someone's at a pension of over 100,000 isn't going to change that situation. And of course there are other issues that we can look at, and particularly in terms of taxation. This is one half of the equation if we're going to introduce greater equality in terms of pension reductions. The other aspect of it is in terms of taxation, and the government considers all these issues.
Well, I'm not inquiring after your personal comfort, Minister, or otherwise. It was more a reference to your political judgment and comfort on these matters. If you were to revisit that FEMPI legislation, protecting all pensions of €60,000 and lower, which covers the vast, vast majority of public service workers. But if you were to revisit the levies in a progressive way, we have demonstrated clearly that there is a €10 million saving to be made You may dismiss that in the general budgetary arithmetic, but I want to put it to you directly that when you're coming in here looking for 25 million additional specifically for the purposes of pensions, I'm saying to you back directly that my reaction to that is to say that I would not be supportive of those additional monies unless and until you are prepared to address all of those pensions above the €60,000 bracket and climbing up then to those at €100,000 and more. And I can't understand, I've had this debate with Minister Howland. It's an ongoing, it's like an echo chamber with the man. He's told us all about the constitutional dilemma, the property rights and so on and so forth. The institution of levies has been established within the FEMPI framework. When you talk about equity and dealing with citizens and workers in an equitable fashion, not alone you, but the state system has to have an eye to the general budgetary position. We are insolvent. We are in the doldrums. You will next week come with a package of 3.5 billion in cuts and additional charges. And I think the time now for excuses for not dealing with the small number of wildly excessive pensions, that the time on that has just run out. We're not going to have a meeting of minds on it. And can I put one additional question to you? The TLAC terms that still exist, I think there's 16 serving Secretaries General who enjoy those TLAC terms. I want to know why it is that those have not been abolished. I think we can all accept that Secretaries General, to my way of thinking, are vastly overpaid at €200,000. I think it is indefensible. But the additional bells and whistles of additional years and special payments is just completely an obscenity at this stage. You have 16 serving Secretaries General, some of whom came in, by the way, on the watch of the new government, who still enjoy these terms. I want to know why you haven't dealt with it yet and when you intend to grasp that nettle.
Mr. Hayes.
Firstly, can I say to the Deputy, the Minister replied to a question that she put to him, I think, on the 21st of November last, on the question of additional reductions for people on 100,000 plus. I'm not sure what her proposal is specifically. I mean, we've done 20%. I'm not sure what she's proposing. My proposal is that between 60 and 80,000 euro that we'd shift the levy from 12% to 20%, that a pension between 80 and 100,000 would move again from the additional 12% levy to a 50%, and anything above 100,000 would move from 20 to 99%. In other words, yes, you would end the phenomenon of pensions above 100,000 euro for civil servants. Yeah, but the advice that we have obtained, which was set out in the reply which Minister gave you, that a move to introduce 100% or close to 100% rate of pension reduction on pensions over 100,000 could immediately run up against the likelihood of the courts finding that such a complete restriction of property rights could give rise to legal difficulties. That's the advice that we set out to you at the time. And, you know, we have got to be mindful of advice that is given to us. She refers to the FEMPI legislation. It is not normal legislation, it is emergency legislation. It's emergency legislation.
That's the point, Minister.
And because of that, one has to be clear that in any scheme of reductions that is proposing to make, it has got to be proportionate to the amounts people put in, B, the likely expectation they had through the deferred remuneration that they had, and C, how are they being affected vis-a-vis other categories of pensioners, which is a crucial issue which I think the courts would have a view on.
Legal Minister actually is double arbitration where you're being penalised twice ahead of everyone else.
Yes. Now, so for the purposes of headlines and quick fix pretend solutions and fantasy economics, these are wonderful things to say. But unlike the Deputy, we've got to bring in actual measures that make a difference. We've got to bring in measures that actually matter, and actually we've got to bring in tax and expenditure issues which oblige ourselves to hit the targets that we've been given. And so she may well have the luxury of putting forward the fantasy proposal that she has on many occasions. But that's something, a luxury that we're not. Just hear me out. On the question that she raised, and this is the fundamental question here, and she can choose to vote against this, and that is her choice. But,
sorry, Minister, there's no votes.
there's no vote on it. Well, so she can vote, yeah, exactly, in the chamber, I'm saying. And if she chooses to do that, or anyone chooses to do that, indeed, the clerical officer who's retiring next week are on very small pensions, are indeed the staff officer who is retiring and with the legitimate expectation on lump sums. This is the money we're looking for, Chairman, to actually ensure that in this subhead this year, in this vote this year, we can balance our books. So rather than putting forward, for whatever obtuse political reason, the view that this money is for the purposes of, for people of pensions of 100,000 and plus, not so. The great majority of this money, I suspect, is for people on very small public pensions who have worked hard over a period of time, and she and her party chooses to take a stand against them. Well, so be it.